Welcome to this Explainer, Medicos. Today we're doing a high-yield clinical ward round on something you are literally going to see almost every single day in your ophthalmology rotations: cataracts. We are distilling the essential pathology, the clinical features, and the surgical cures straight from A.K. Khurana's comprehensive ophthalmology. The goal here is simple. We want to arm you with exactly what you need to know to evaluate and manage these patients on the wards with total confidence.
Okay, here's our clinical pathway for today's session. We've got 6 key stops. 1. Definition and classification. 2. Etiology of cataracts. 3. Clinical features and signs. 4. Untreated cataract complications. 5. Preoperative patient evaluation. And finally, 6. Surgical management techniques. This is structured exactly how your brains need to absorb it for exams, tracing the patient's entire journey. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Definition and Classification. So, at the end of the day, what exactly is a cataract? Well, in a healthy, normal eye, the crystalline lens is perfectly transparent, right? It functions to beautifully focus light directly onto the retina. A cataract is, quite simply, the disturbance of that transparency. Due to various degenerative processes, the lens fibers opacify. They essentially turn this normally clear, pristine crystalline lens into a cloudy, opaque barrier to light.
But, not all cataracts are created equal. In ophthalmology, location really matters. We classify them morphologically based on exactly where the opacities form. You can have capsular cataracts right on the outer envelope, subcapsular ones just beneath it, cortical opacities forming in the main body, and of course, nuclear cataracts developing right smack in the dense center. Nailing down this morphology is an absolute must because it dictates how fast a patient's vision is going to drop and under what specific lighting conditions they'll struggle the most.
Beyond just the anatomy, we also have to categorize them etiologically. There are congenital or developmental forms that show up in youth or even before birth. But the absolute heavy hitter here, the acquired senile cataract. To put this into perspective for you, by the time people hit age 70, over 90% of them will have developed a senile cataract. It's basically an inevitable part of aging.
Moving right along to Section 2, Etiology of cataracts. What's actually driving this process?
Well, what drives a pediatric cataract is very different from a geriatric one. For congenital cases, we're looking at early life factors. Think genetics, intrauterine infections like maternal rubella, or even profound maternal malnutrition and anoxia. On the flip side, acquired senile cataracts are the grand total of a lifetime of environmental and lifestyle damage. We're talking prolonged UV irradiation from the sun, smoking, which actually introduces cyanides that denature lens proteins, and even severe lifetime dehydrational crises like cholera.
Okay, Section 3, Clinical Features and Signs. Let's talk about the actual presentation. As medicos, before we even think about touching the slit lamp, we need to step into the patient's shoes. What are they actually feeling? What are the hallmark visual disturbances they're going to complain about before their vision goes completely dark? These symptoms are your classic clinical breadcrumbs. Early on, they'll complain of an intense glare or total intolerance to bright light, like oncoming car headlights, because the opacity is scattering all that incoming light. They might tell you they're seeing double or triple out of one eye, which is unicular polyopia, caused by irregular refractive indices in the lens. They might even see colored halos from water droplets trapped in the lens. And here is one of the most fascinating quirks in ophthalmology: second sight. In nuclear sclerosis, the hardening nucleus actually increases the refractive power of the lens, causing a temporary index myopia. All of a sudden, your elderly patient can read the newspaper without their reading glasses.
When you do finally put these patients behind a slit lamp, the color changes in the pupillary area are striking. As a nuclear senile cataract matures, it shifts progressively from a dull gray into a dense amber or brown. And in super extreme neglected cases, it can turn almost completely black. We call that cataract nigra.
Now, you've got to rigorously document these clinical signs on the wards. First, check visual acuity. It might start decently at 6/9, but it can plummet to mere perception of light as the cataract hypermatures. Document the lens color using oblique illumination. And you absolutely must perform the iris shadow test. Normally, if you shine a light obliquely, the iris casts a crescent shadow on the lens opacity. But here's the kicker. As the cataract fully matures and the cortex becomes completely opaque right up to the capsule, that iris shadow completely disappears. Which brings us to Section 4. Untreated cataract complications. What happens if we just do nothing? Well, an untreated hypermature cataract is essentially a ticking time bomb inside the eye. It can start leaking altered lens proteins right into the anterior chamber, which triggers a massive immune response called phacoanaphylactic uveitis. It can also induce insanely painful spikes in intraocular pressure. This happens either because the lens physically swells and blocks the drainage angle, that's phacomorphic glaucoma, or because macrophages eat those leaked proteins and get jammed up in the trabecular meshwork, which is phacolytic glaucoma. And if that wasn't enough, the zonules holding the lens can eventually just give out, leading to a completely disastrous lens subluxation.
All right, moving to Section 5, preoperative patient evaluation. We need a plan before hitting the OR.
Your surgical checklist has to be rock solid. Step 1, clear those systemic risks like uncontrolled diabetes. Step 2, rigorously rule out local infections. You must do a lacrimal syringing to check for dacryocystitis. Operating through an infected tear film is literally just begging for endophthalmitis. Step 3, do a deep anterior segment exam to check the corneal endothelium. Step 4, measure IOP to rule out existing glaucoma. And finally, Step 5, verify macular potential. If the retina behind that cloudy lens is already destroyed, surgery won't help. So we use tools like laser interferometry to predict their post-operative visual outcomes.
And finally, Section 6, surgical management techniques. Time to scrub in.
Historically, surgeons did what was called an intracapsular cataract extraction, or ICCE. They'd remove the whole lens and its capsule in one fell swoop. But that required weak zonules and carried a ton of risks. Today, our modern gold standard is the extracapsular cataract extraction, or ECCE. Whether we're doing manual small incision surgery or phaco emulsification, the brilliant concept here is that we remove the diseased nucleus and cortex, but we deliberately leave the posterior capsule perfectly intact. Why? Because that remaining capsule becomes a natural, built-in sling to hold the new artificial intraocular lens.
It truly is a microscopic ballet. You've got your precise initial incisions, the creation of the continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis, which is basically peeling open the front of the capsule envelope, and then the careful delivery or ultrasonic emulsification of that dense nucleus. Those steps define a successful modern extraction.
But guys, the story doesn't always end perfectly in the OR. Even after a flawless surgery, we've got to watch out for late complications on the warts. The big one is the after cataract, or secondary cataract. Remember that posterior capsule we specifically left behind to hold the new lens? Well, over months or years, residual epithelial cells can proliferate and actually opacify that remaining capsule, completely clouding the patient's vision all over again.
This secondary cataract usually shows up in a couple of distinct morphological ways. It might form a thick, dense border that we call a Summering's ring, or it might look like a cluster of tiny frosted soap bubbles scattered across the back of the capsule. Those are the classic Elschnig's pearls. The fantastic news here is that both of these can be elegantly and non-invasively treated right in the clinic using a YAG laser capsulotomy to instantly clear up that visual axis once more.
And there you have it. We've traced the complete clinical journey of the cataract, from the microscopic breakdown of lens fibers to the patient's very first complaints of glare, through to the devastating complications of neglect, and finally, the definitive surgical extraction. So I want to leave you with a thought. The next time an elderly patient excitedly tells you about a miraculous return of their reading vision, will you just celebrate with them, or will you recognize the ticking time bomb of index myopia and immediately power up your slit lamp?